This is Haven Space, a safe place for fantasies, brought to you by sex coach and researcher Sarah Perry. Hi folks, today I want to quickly discuss a small rant that I have about our sex ed system and the way we talk and relate to STDs and STIs in our community, and how those relationships with our bodies and communicable diseases actually leads to riskier sex and really just bad decision making and stigma that sometimes can come across in really violent ways. So I just want to start by saying that I am a sex educator. I have a published kids sex ed book called Positive Sexuality. It's for a demographic of like tween and preteen kids. It's a self-read. It's very sex positive, as the title says, and it actually very briefly mentions STDs and STIs for a specific reason. That reason is that we have found in research about sex education that stigma surrounding STDs and STIs actually leads us to kind of vilifying people who have STDs or STIs or who have had them in the past, and really shuts down the dialogue surrounding our sexual health. So where we could have before probably been hot and heavy with someone and been like, hey, I haven't been tested, so like let's wear a condom, or I haven't been tested, so let's tandem play instead of engaging, because as we know, condoms don't protect against all sexually transmitted diseases, infections, and parasites. Then I think it's important to say that when you shut down those conversations, what it becomes is a conversation about like shaming and about respectability politics. Like, are you a respectable person because you've never had the clap? But that's not how society works. So like, people get sick, people get diseases, and sometimes you can get treatment and sometimes you can get cured. Access to treatment is very much related to how much money we actually have, and it's related to our medical care system. The fact that we don't offer free STI testing and STD testing is honestly shameful. We can't expect our society to function where we don't have conversations about STDs or STIs, because then you potentially are not a respectable person because you even have to have the conversation. And then secondly, where we don't have access to testing. So I get tested very regularly, about every 2 months. And I feel that even that could sometimes not be as often as I probably should. And if I do it privately, I could be paying $350 for a test. Well, that's not feasible on most people's budget. Most people can't afford to pay that once a year, much less every couple of months, much less with every interaction with a new partner. Of course, after waiting a certain amount, gestation period, I like to wait at least 14 days. Some people wait less. There are quick tests for like HIV. And so there are some places that will offer free HIV testing, sometimes free chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis testing. The treatment for chlamydia, syphilis, and gonorrhea is one pill. It is typically given to you. It's a high dose antibiotic. It's typically given to you at any kind of testing facility. In fact, there was a point that I went to go get tested and I had UTI symptoms. And they gave me the pill. I don't like to take medication for no reason, so I waited and I didn't have anything. So ironically, it is given and prescribed so freely that it's even given to people before test results come in. So know that some of the diseases you can get are actually very easy to treat. And then secondly, diseases that we don't consider easy to treat. So let's talk about things like genital warts or herpes. So these diseases, these infections are viral. They stay in your body for life, but that doesn't mean that people live difficult lives with them. So a lot of people deal with viruses like cold sores. That is the same virus. So the Herpes Simplex One is a virus that creates cold sores around your mouth. But if you engage in oral sex and there are cuts, for example, if you're a person who shaves or waxes, you can easily get Herpes Simplex One in your genital area and have it still be herpes simplex 1. And you would deal with it about as often as people deal with cold sores, which also means like exposure to trauma, exposure to sun, bad nutrition possibly could lead to outbreaks, stress, disease, like other illnesses. So it doesn't mean it's a life-threatening diagnosis, and it certainly doesn't mean that you can't engage in healthy, safe, pleasurable sex while having herpes 1 or simplex 2 is also a common genital herpes disease, right? So like a lot of people in our society walk around with genital herpes and we don't know, and we think, oh my God, people are gross and dirty. But you can spread these diseases without knowing that you have them. You can, viral shedding is kind of, it's a controversial term because I feel like the medical world is very divided about the way that we relate to diseases. So viral shedding is a thing. You can easily, like pre-outbreak, you could easily be spreading via rubbing contact these things onto other people, but they don't spread to soft and like unbruised, unscathed skin. Skin has to be broken for viruses to get in. So that's why we worry about things like sexual intercourse, because it tends to be somewhat abrasive to your skin. It can let viruses in. So consider that when you're having sex with people. Know that condoms don't protect against skin conditions because typically the entire skin area is not covered. So things like herpes and warts, they don't live inside of your seminal fluid and your vaginal fluid. They actually live on your skin. So protecting yourself is very different than what you may think, right? So shaming people who do have conditions like this is kind of counterproductive, right? So I will explore a little bit later the reasons that we don't shame people, but one of the main reasons is that no one will go get tested, nobody will go seek treatment and have better results and be less likely to spread to other partners if we're shaming people and calling them out on their behaviors because we think they were somewhat irresponsible when, as we have learned, you don't always know, correct? And a lot of times people have diseases and don't show them and don't show symptoms. So with herpes, for example, you always have bigger, stronger outbreaks at the beginning, and then gradually your body gets more capable of kind of fighting this virus off. The same way that people with cold sores typically have worse cold sores when they're children, and as they get older, they happen less and less often. Also, we have medications that treat outbreaks, and without being close to an outbreak or being reactive, then you're not going to spread this. So I'm going to go with the big one since we're running out of time. HIV, right? So HIV forever has been the big fear monger of why you should behave and have sex with just one person who is only having sex with one other person. But I'm here to tell you that HIV is not a death sentence. People live long, happy, pleasurable, healthy lives being HIV positive. Not only that, but there are different strains of HIV. So while we think that HIV is this like catch-all term, it's not. There are different types of HIV, and then different people that have different types of HIV should also be careful with each other. The medications and the treatments that we have now for HIV can make you undetectable, which means that your viral load is so small that even when you get an STD test, it would show negative. So there's a term in the sex ed and the sex education community that is U equals U. It translates to undetectable equals untransmittable. So this is a phrase that people don't know. This is a thing people don't understand. If your viral load is so low of HIV that you're undetectable, you cannot transmit it to other people. And I'm not talking about people on prescriptions like PrEP, which is a prophylactic pill that you would take that actually keeps you from being able to spread HIV. So wonderful when you have a partner that you live with and that you're having sex with regularly who is HIV positive, because sometimes their viral load may change over time, especially if they're not being super consistent with their treatment, which, as we know, people that deal with chronic illness also deal with stress and anxiety related to treatment and those options. So that makes sense. But if you're not, just know that HIV doesn't mean that you have to die alone and sad and miserable. That's not how it works. So we need to be careful and reframe our conversations about sexuality to be less about be careful and more about find pleasure and communicate freely. And when we go about and we don't have accurate information about sex and STDs and STIs, then we go and we lie to our partners. So studies show that people that are in monogamous relationships, or coerced monogamous relationships, actually have higher STD and STI rates than people who are non-consensual, who are consensually polyamorous or consensually non-monogamous, because these people have these conversations a little more often and a little more freely. So let's start by shaming and stigma leaving our households, speaking to our kids about sex from the point of view of pleasure and of consent, and internalizing those things when we have conversations with our own partners. Some people decide not to get tested because they feel that they've been with one partner. But the reality is we don't really know what our partners do. As much as we want to trust them and as much as we trust ourselves, it's also a good idea to just go get tested. Also know that STDs and STIs is kind of a misnomer because they're not just sexually transmitted. Okay, there's many other ways to get diseases like this. You could be, for example, kissing someone and develop cold sores, herpes simplex 1. You could also be, for example, getting a blood transfusion and get HIV. So I know people that have actually tested HIV positive because blood transfusions didn't used to test for HIV. So know that the best way to keep yourself safe is to get tested often and also to continue having the conversations with all of your partners and your family and your loved ones about why it's important to get tested, just to be aware so that we can be getting the treatment we need without shaming each other for having amazing, pleasurable encounters. Thanks for listening.